Continuing on, we need to add the concept of unsubscribing from these updates to a user model. And the idea here is to add a new field to the user model that will essentially generate a random hex number that we can add to the link in the email. So it's somewhat secure, like more secure than just having the user log in every time. And no one wants to do that when they unsubscribe from something. So this kind of takes that and runs with it. I wouldn't say it's the most perfect feature or way to implement it, but it's the way I found to be the best for me. So what I want to do is first generate a new column that we add to the user model. It's going to be called unsubscribe hash. So Rails generate migration, add unsubscribe hash to users, and I'll say unsubscribe hash string. Rails, we'll just go ahead and say Rails db migrate. I do the same thing in my Hello Rails course. If you've ever checked that out, we do kind of a similar concept. It's a Reddit clone we build where we have unsubscribing mechanisms from emails and whatnot. So it's kind of a neat thing that I'm just including for free here. So hope you dig it. On the user model, we need to add this unsubscribe method. So the idea here is every time a user is created, we're going to generate a secure token and save it to their actual user model in the database. And the idea here is when they do create this or click this link in the email, that number is going to match up, and then it'll be them, only them, who can actually do this thing and perform this method. So what that looks like is before create, we can do these callback functions on models just like you would in controller. So it's kind of nice. We'll say add unsubscribe hash, and we'll create a private method block. So everything below here is going to be private. Indent a little bit and say add unsubscribe hash, and this will essentially call the user class and set it to what's baked into Ruby. So secure random hex. So that just generates a new token, a new number, and sets it to that column right before the user's created once it's saved. Now at this point, we don't actually have those in our existing users. So this would only pertain to new users you create on the fly. You could go through in your console and update those. So I'll do that. So what I want to do is take all the users and map through each. So we'll just say user.update, and then pass in that unsubscribe hash column, and within it we'll just do that secure random.hex call. If you run this, it should be all set. So if we say user.all, oh, I don't think I closed that. That's what's wrong. Let me back out and try this again. Made a typo there. I'm gonna copy this line, paste. I need to close this. Boom. There we go. So notice that each user got updated. That's just 2 users in my database. If you're doing this on a bigger app, it might take a while. So be forewarned. That might be a thing to deal with. Next, with that in mind, we can just say, I mean, if you really want to verify, we could just go Rails console user.last. It's going to be jsmitty. Notice the hash it created. So it's this scrambled number that we're going to access later. So to use this in practice, we need some new routing. So I'll just add a new path for this particular unsubscribe. And it can be anywhere, but we're going to say a match. And we're going to say users unsubscribe. This can be like anything really if you want it. But then we'll pass in the unsubscribe hash. and that's going to map to our controller we're going to create called emails, and then an unsubscribe method on it, or action. And then we'll say as unsubscribe, and then via all routes in our project here, we can see there's a new, if I just say unsubscribe, the fact that we call it as unsubscribe gives us this shorthand for this giant URL. Otherwise, it's going to point to an emails controller called unsubscribe. So we can create that controller next. And I'll just generate it. We can just say Rails generate controller emails. We could just say emails, yeah. And then in it, we could just say unsubscribe. Okay. In that controller, it should just have that one method now. Nothing in it, but it will create a view, which is what we want. The view is going to be where you end up when you do click that link in the email. It's going to say like successfully unsubscribe. So we can add that next. I'll actually kind of pull that from my other project just to save some time. Just some generic markup, but we do add a little bit of a reason of what you've opted out from. That all happens in the controller, which we'll account for next. And then in the actual email, we need to render the unsubscribe link now. So what we can do is create a shared folder. I'm just going to call it shared. Inside, I'll just call it unsubscribe link or something. So unsubscribe. So in there will be some general markup for this. So class, we'll just set a style of font size. 14 pixels, margin top 16, and Outlook is weird, so you can do this other margin top 16 pixels, so it renders in certain mail clients that are annoying. Then we'll just say link to, and we'll pass unsubscribe URL. That's the one we just generated in the routes. Inside, we'll say @user unsubscribe hash. So the @user, again, if you recall, our mailers correlates to the user getting the email. So in all these mailers, we have this @user instance. So you need to have that, and that's where that's coming from. What we can do though with its URL, we can pass in like a parameter through the URL saying, okay, what is it subscribing from? So that's what this is going to be. I'm going to call it subscription, and then a subscription type will be what we render through the partial as like an instance or ID. So that'll make more sense here in a second. So this will render in each mailer now. Let me double check everything's typed right. I think so. So in all of our mailers, we just render that partial now. We can go back to our views, task mailer. We shared unsubscribe link, and then we'll say subscription type will actually be a key, like a key we give it. So for this one, task created, we'll just say task created, task completed, and you'll see why we do this in a second. Okay. Now, if we want to go check out those emails, just to see what the link looks like, we can do that. So Rails mailers. Just check one out. It just looks like this, but look at the URL there. If you look at the lower left of my screen, it has that secure random hash, and then our routing, and then notice the subscription parameter is passing in what we identified it as adding to project. So this relates to that specific email. So task completed will have a similar thing. So that way in the controller, we can kind of do some logic with it, knowing which one we want to update. So in the controller layer, this is where the magic really happens. We want to go back to that email controller. In the unsubscribe link, we're going to do first find the user based on that hash we passed. So in active record, depending on the column on your model, you can just do a find by whatever the model name is. It's pretty handy. So in this case, that's what we're doing. So params, and then we're going to pass in the one that comes through on the link. So unsubscribe hash, which is what we called it. That gives us access to the user model, which we're going to update based on the parameters set. So case statement will say whatever the subscription comes in as, we're going to do some logic around subscription. So we'll say when added to project. We can do an in block here. So we'll first set a reason instance just to say update the view being added. You'll see what this looks like in a second. Projects and user.update notify when added to project. Let's be setting these to false if you're unsubscribing, so that makes sense. Then we could do a when task created, kind of a similar thing here. Kind of copy these, but just change a few things. Okay, so that should go ahead and toggle that Boolean in the background when we do click that link in the email. So what that ends up doing, if you go and just click one just for grins, and you got a typo. Emails controller, end of output. I think I have one too many end blocks here. Yeah, so we get this view. If you go to your profile settings, you'll see it there. It didn't do it because I think I am not the original sender of that email. Yeah, this is going to Andy, so that wouldn't count. So if I sign out and go in as my other account, and go to that email again, I'll say turn this off. Okay, notice the URL. Go to my settings, that should be turned off. So pretty cool. It works. Now one thing we could do is make sure that when that happens, if I do turn this off, we shouldn't be sending that email, you know. So one thing I want to do first though is get mail catcher set up. So if you've never heard of mail catcher, it's a nice little tool to add to your Rails app. It's another gem, third-party gem, so you'll need to install it as an actual just gem, not in your gem file. And then we need to add this line right here to our development environment. So I'll just go do that real quick. Just at the end's fine. And once saved, you'll need to reboot your server. I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'll run mail catcher. I already have this installed, so you might need to install it on your own first. And when you fire it up, you can hit this second link and it'll go ahead and run these emails. So a few are already sent. I think I was demoing this the other day, so I'll clear those out. And right now, if we were to go create some sort of task or a project, let's say a task at this point. So hello world. Task was created. I don't see an email. That's because we aren't running Sidekick in the background. So one other thing we need to do on top of running mail catcher and our Rails server is running Sidekick. So you can do that assuming you have Sidekick in your project. Bundle exec Sidekick. This is what I typically run. You need to queue up the default and then mailers. You can see the documentation on that if you're not sure what that means. Should kick up this gem though, which is the queuing service. And then you might see an email come through at that point because it was queued up. That deliver later method we called earlier, that's what's going on. And it won't send until the Sidekick's like running. So this ended up working. We did get an email saying this project, a new task was created. I could go ahead and do the same for it. Was checked or completed. Let's see if that works. Maybe we have an issue there. Double check. See if we get any logs. That should be sending an email, but it's not. On perimeter ID, it is completed. Let's see our controller real quick. So tasks, controller, create, project save, project users, current user, task mailer with task. Okay, it looks good. One thing I got you is first need to do this. I need to check first if the task is updated before running this. So we'll say that. Save that there. And try that again. There we go. Now we're getting the email. So first need to verify that it was saved. So that's good to go. And then what was the other one? Completed, created, and then added to a project. So maybe if we make a new project, let's go to project, new project, second. Got an email for that. Andy Leverance added you second project. Cool. So if I toggle that off, okay. That should work. Oh, this is to me. I'm logged in, so it needs to be the other user in this case. So that's a little hiccup that's kind of confusing. Of sending these emails locally. But other than that, this seems to be working, so everything's going great. What we need to do now is, if that person is going to toggle off that preference, we should probably not email them as a result. So what we can do is go into our controllers where we added the logic to loop through each user and just add the correlating Boolean property. And that's basically wrapping things up. So here, we added that comment early on. If we just do a if user dot notify when added to project, just a question mark. Basically, if that's true, we'll send that email. Otherwise, skip it. This is kind of performance heavy though. You might want to extract this into some other maybe background job on its own. You might even do this stuff after a model, like we did on our unsubscribe hash, like, you know, that after create concept. You can do it even on the model layer. The concept that's tough with that is getting access to the current user. You can't have that as easily in your models. It is possible. It's just not so much of a convention. So in our task controller, we'll do the same thing. So instead of this mailer. We'll say if user.notify when task created, send that. And then this one will be the same of completed. Okay, so those essentially should check first if those emails are sent. So say I am unsubscribed. Let's check all my settings first. Let's say I'll unsubscribe from everything and just update that. There we go. So if I were to, make a to-do task that goes to JSmitty, but if this is kind of confusing. If I log out and go into JSmitty and go into my profile, I'll uncomment everything. Oops, I need to pass in my password. Update, and then log out, go back into my other account so we can see if I make changes, John Smith should get notified, but since he hasn't subscribed to get notified, we shouldn't see any emails. So I just completed that task, created a task, no emails sent. If I create a new project and add John to it, he shouldn't get a project notification. So add him. Cool. Notice no emails came in. So this mail catcher service, it delivers any email for any user. So you got to think about it that way. That's what might be confusing. But in this essence, those subscriptions aren't coming in. So everything's working great. And our unsubscribe links are working as well. So if I go to my subscriptions, that none were set here. If I update that, save, go to log out, go to John Smith, and I'll add a new task. I'll complete a task. I do get an email. Okay, so I'm gonna go log back out now. Log in as Andy. I know this is probably confusing as all hell. Go back to that email. This is the one sent to me directly because I have been subscribed. I want to unsubscribe. If I go to my profile settings, I should not see that now when a task is completed. So that's working well. Great. So everything seems to be working, guys. So that's the gist of how I'm adding email subscriptions this day and age. It's not perfect because it could be cleaned up. There's a lot of repeated code here, or repeated code. These things could probably be extracted to your model layer if you really wanted to, and maybe even extracted to concerns that are included so you don't have so much logic going on for each action. But I wanted to give you at least the foundation of something like this. I know it's something that honestly I had trouble finding anywhere on the internet of like a good tactic or way to do this without, ripping my hair out. So hopefully that's been helpful. You could take this a step further and just render like way better UI around like the user logic when you add a person to a project or, any of that stuff. But just taking into consideration, this is how that stuff works. Hopefully you enjoyed the Ajax portion as well. So that's it for now. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to leave it in the comments. This will be a blog post as well on my blog, so go check that out for the written version. And until next time, thanks again for watching. And the channel actually just passed 10,000 subscribers, so I can't thank you all enough for the support. It really helps me keep going, and I really appreciate it. All right, guys, peace. Hello Rails is my new course on Ruby on Rails. I'll teach you Ruby on Rails from the ground up. Visit hellorails.io for more information.